Hey, it's Dan here from The Plague, and welcome to another episode of Hidden Gems. This is where we take a look at some classic albums that have been kind of overlooked over the years that we think deserve a little more attention. Joining me as usual is Nels, and he will be starting us off this week, so go for it, Nels.
Hello. Yeah, I have chosen an album that at the time I sure liked it a lot. But then it kind of, I don't know, it got, for various reasons, it got kind of buried. And it is Pantera's Power Metal, which I think a lot of fans of the band will know this as like the last hair metal band or hair metal album that they did, or glam album, or whatever you want to call it, because it does mark a pretty steep transition from their old sound to what would become kind of the more modern Pantera, starting with Cowboys from Hell. But this album in particular marks the first album with Phil Anselmo on vocals. And despite the fact that it's known as a hair metal, or from their hair metal era, it's actually, I think, very transitional. It has a lot of proto speed metal type stuff on it, a lot of sort of power metal-y stuff on it, as well as definitely some more traditional, I guess if you want to call it hair metal type stuff. And their image was definitely very hair metal in these days. But it's an album that at some point I came back to and listened to just a ton. And I don't think there's really a bad song on this album. It's really good from start to finish. It's really interesting if you haven't heard old Pantera to go back, especially, man, if you're a fan of Diamond Daryl Abbott's guitar playing, later to become known as Dimebag. It's all over this. I mean, the guy is just incredible on here. Just the solos are amazing. He's starting to do some very heavy, almost thrashy type riffs already on this album. I don't think it's an album that you can, if you're a fan of like good straightforward heavy metal bordering on speed metal, this is a great album. And Phil's vocals, man, despite what he later kind of turned into, he's Halford-esque on this. I mean, he hits the high notes, which I guess their previous singer did too, but he has just a ton of power. And his vocals are amazing on here. It's sad that the band, I think, eventually really disowned this entire era and this album with it, because there's just some incredible stuff on here. Obviously, it came out in '88, and in '88 they were already writing the songs for Cowboys from Hell as well. So, while the sound is very different, and certainly their production that they got from Terry Date on Cowboys from Hell really, defined their sound. And it's certainly not on this album. This album has more straightforward production, good but straightforward. There is, as far as the sort of hair metal influences, that they apparently had some sort of relationship with, is it Keel? Yes, it's Keel. Mark Ferrari, the guitar player for Keel, actually wrote one of the songs on here.
Wow.
He wrote Proud to Be Loud, and
Okay.
Keel actually, I guess, recorded that song too. I have not heard it.
I'm sure it's terrible.
Yeah, it's probably terrible. And there's a couple of guitar parts on here that are recorded by Mark Ferrari as well. It's funny, in the credits it says Diamond Daryl, or Diamond Abbott, or just Diamond maybe, all guitars. And then later it says, intro guitars by Mark Ferrari on, I can't remember which song it's on. It might be Proud to Be Loud. But yeah, just a great album. I really love this album. Unfortunately, well, I was going to say it's hard to find, but really it's not. The original one, like this one, is hard to find on their own record label, and they never set up any redistribution for it or reissued it. But tons of people have bootlegged it. You can find just, if you go to eBay or something, there's all kinds of bootlegs of this. And certainly it's, available in a lot of streaming places as well.
Yeah, I listened to it on YouTube. That's where I go to check it out.
You can find anything on YouTube, whether it's official or not, and like 10 different versions of it. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking back, I remember when you got that album because I had heard of the band before because I think your brother Eric had at least I Am the Night, maybe even Project Jungle. I don't remember, but
right.
And then I remember you got that, and it was like it was when we were first getting CDs, and
right.
For some reason I remember listening to it in your car, and I don't know if you even had a CD player in your car, except maybe one of those portable ones.
I had a little clamshell Sony.
Okay, that's right.
Like
a little
dash.
Velcro stuck on the dashboard. That's right. But yeah, I remember being quite impressed with that album when it came out. It was like, because I'd heard that they were like more kind of just straightforward kind of metal, and this has some like pretty speed metal-y songs on it, like well, the song Power Metal, but then like Over and Out, that song could be on Cowboys from Hell. It's like many change ups. It's kind of got that Megadeth sort of like really like complex riffing, and
even like Down Below, the sort of fast breaky parts on that sound very like that could be right out of a thrash song. There's definitely tons of stuff on here that you can see where they were going. And it's it definitely has that transitional period to it. The earlier stuff, I listened to a lot of their earlier records just because we used to, again, carry them at the record store that I worked at. So we had all the Projects in the Jungle and Metal Magic and I Am the Night. I remember, I think the band was already trying to kind of transition when that album came out. And certainly there's Down Below is on both albums, I believe. But it's with their old singer, but I listened to that just a ton, like all the time in the store. We had that on. And so I'm sure that's why I picked this up and was, really impressed. But yeah, their older stuff was definitely, I think all their older stuff is pretty solid. It definitely leans towards sort of hard rock. I mean, it's definitely metal. It's definitely very metal, but more like straightforward. I hate to use these terms like hair metal and glam metal, but a lot of it is still very heavy.
Yeah, people think of like Warrant and Poison. It's like no, and it was definitely not that. It was definitely more like I feel like if you took their three big influences, which was Judas Priest, Kiss, and what's the other band that they always were talking about? Maybe I put a note here. I did not.
You got to write these things down, Dan.
So the two influences.
Nobody expects Pantera.
but yeah, it was definitely more of the heavier side of that mainstream. I think it was more Van Halen. That's the other one.
Yeah, for sure.
The vocals and the lyrics, I think, is what kind of made it seem more like a glam sort of band because they were like kind of party time, just kind of stupid lyrics.
Absolutely. And that the guy's, I think his name is Terry Glaze, his vocal delivery was definitely right in there with that sort of more glam metal. It definitely has, it's really interesting to listen to Down Below, the two versions, because they're obviously they're the same band playing the same song, I think a year apart with two different singers. And it's just, even though like the solos and stuff, there's little differences, but a lot of it's very the same. But the production and the vocal style give it an entirely different feel. And that's another thing I think compared to where Pantera went eventually is the amount of guitar solos on this and certainly on his earlier stuff, even the earlier albums. Amazing. And the guy was just an incredible guitar player. And I really, that's one of the things when they went away from, when it became kind of trendy not to have as many solos in your songs, I felt like, for me, Pantera, their music really suffered then because, man, that was such a huge strong point for me personally. I can't believe that guitar solos ever kind of became.
The 90s were weird. They were a crazy time.
Yeah, for sure. Not that I didn't like later Pantera, and certainly Cowboys from Hell, man, that, there's nothing overlooked about that album, and I think totally deservedly so. It's an amazing album with Terry Date producing it, and incredible.
Yeah, I went back and listened to the first three, and a little bit of the later ones too, but the first three like 90s albums, and I remember at the time that they came out, like I liked Cowboys from Hell, and then I really loved Vulgar because it was like so intense and heavy. But then listening to it now, like Cowboys is just a way better album. Like it's just the first like 7 or 8 songs in that are so good. His singing, like he actually sings a lot more on that. He hasn't like really gotten into that hardcore, just like annoying vocal style yet.
Right.
And the solos, the guitar solos in that album are just amazing. Whereas later he would start doing those like kind of weird, noisy, you know, kind of like Tom Morello almost. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
I think it's fine to have those, but if you're also one of the best guitar players in the world, play, you know, these amazing musical solos still, you know. Not that I want to, you know, rant too much about more modern Pantera instead of talking about this album.
Yes.
But yeah, that's certainly one of the big contrasts, I think. And again, to anybody that has not dug this up because of any kind of, you know, they've heard their earlier albums were weak or anything, man, if you like guitar playing, if you like that sort of transitional style of metal, this is an awesome album.
And it's funny that I think a lot of people look at it being called power metal and it's like, well, that's not power metal. You know, power metal is Halloween and Stratovarius and stuff. But
right
at the time, like that term really didn't have a clear meaning. And I feel like a lot of the bands that I thought of as power metal at the time were like Metal Church and Omen and like even Sabotage. Like it was like bands that were heavier than Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, but they weren't speed metal or thrash metal.
Yeah, right.
And I think that pretty well describes that album. You know, it's got elements that are from speed metal and thrash, but it's not, wouldn't call it that kind of an album.
Yep, for sure. And I think it's, you know, it's probably of note that a lot of metal genres started out as, well, like black metal. You know, the first black metal album isn't considered to be black metal now. You know, it's like there are these terms that come along that sound interesting and they sound, but they aren't really connected to what the genre that it would eventually be defined until later. And power metal is definitely one of those. I mean, even there's the classic Metallica business card that says Metallica power metal. It's like no one knew what that meant, but it sounded cool. It's like power and metal, so how can it be bad?
Let's see. I had a few notes on just some of the songs on there. Rock the World. Listening to that now, like it really reminds me of Queensryche, like The Warning.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Got that kind of like, you know, the chorus of The Warning has that same kind of
but way better production on this album.
Sadly, yes. It's
there's a lot of weird things about this album. Like a ton of the several of the songs got used in soundtracks. They're on like the Mighty Ducks soundtrack. They're on
really
Donnie Darko, and the band isn't even credited as Pantera. They're credited as the Dead Green Mummies, apparently.
Wow.
It was used in a and these are all for Proud to Be Loud, by the way, used in the soundtrack to a MacGyver TV movie. I haven't actually gone back and listened to the Keel version.
I am curious to hear that now. Yeah.
I kind of figure I know what it's going to sound like. Oh, and also the final song, the sort of
oh yes,
PST-88. You know.
Yes, I did want to touch on that as well. It's the one thing I could probably do without on the album.
I don't know. I find it kind of charming. Apparently Diamond Daryl is responsible for some of the vocals on that track.
Excellent. One thing I noticed just looking this up on Metal Archives was that, and of course you have to take this with the greatest salt because it's like the reviews on Metal Archives are, you know, written, I think just kind of by random people that feel like they have enough time to like write an actual review of things. But this is the highest rated Pantera album on there.
Seriously? That's awesome. That's very surprising. Well, I think it's interesting how fractured the fan base for Pantera. You know, if you gathered up all the people that really were big fans of Pantera throughout the ages, and I feel like they were a very popular band in their genre at this time. They were well known in the sort of, you know, metal, sort of the third tier metal scene was very popular.
Yeah.
but that's probably the most fractious set of people that all their earlier fans probably were like, or I don't want to say all, I guess a lot of the earlier fans, if they really were into the type of metal that was even before this album, probably their popularity with those people fell off as time went on, and the people that eventually became sort of new to the band and fans of the band, probably a lot of them know nothing of their back catalog,
Yeah,
and certainly suppressed it, almost going to great lengths to make sure that no one is aware of or sees their back catalog, which is sad.
It's kind of weird to me. Like, I feel like at some point in the 90s, after they got really popular, they could have easily repackaged with different photos and, the new logo, that album.
Oh, for sure.
And it would have gone over well with their fans at the time. I think so.
Yeah, I think
most of them.
It, like we were saying, it's definitely a transitional album. You can definitely hear the Pantera that eventually became, certainly the Cowboys from Hell Pantera. You can definitely hear it in here. It's not like it's a completely different band, or they're like went from being country to, it's none of that. It's nothing like that. So I'm really not. I was always kind of curious as to why the band seemed to have such an extreme desire to not have that stuff reissued. It's interesting that they pretty much were their own label at this point, Metal Magic Records. I wonder how that actually, like, what were the mechanics of that? Was it really hard probably to run your own record label, and were you doing all your own promotion and everything else? Because after this album, the next album was on Atco, and which I'm sure unburdened the band or whoever, management they had running everything quite a bit. I'm sure they had way more, got on better tours and just better promotion for the album, and got radio airplay probably. And, certainly Cowboys from Hell charted for the first time for them and all that stuff. So it would be interesting to know some of the history behind Metal Magic and who was actually involved. I kind of can't imagine anybody in the band really sitting down and being like the accountant or, well, I can't imagine Daryl doing it. I can't imagine Phil doing it. And certainly he wasn't in the band for most of that time. It'd be interesting to hear more about that. Probably there's a YouTube video somewhere of history of Metal Magic.
Yeah, I'm surprised there isn't like a documentary about Pantera out there, like a professional one yet. Maybe there is. I'm just not aware of it. But
right. Yeah, it's interesting. Certainly their whole story, and all the way up to the tragic ending, just like one of a kind. It's so bizarre and off the wall, and they were such a bizarre and off the wall band.
Cool. Well, I'm going to show you my choice for this week, which unfortunately is a reissue that's very glossy, so it's hard to get a good picture of it.
Yeah.
Try to tip it a little bit there, but it's Accept's Objection Overruled, which came out in 93, I believe.
93.
Yes. It was their reunion with Udo after having been apart for, they'd been apart from him for a couple years in the late 80s, and they had David Reese from Bangalore Choir singing, and then that failed spectacularly, and so they broke up for a few years, and then this was the comeback album. And I feel like in the grand scheme of things, it's really kind of gotten lost because, you have like everyone focusing on the classic albums, Breaker Through, Russian Roulette, and then the reunion albums, well, not the reunion albums, I guess it was kind of a reunion, but the modern version of Accept with Mark Tornillo singing. And that's kind of its own whole separate thing, which is, got a very popular life of its own. And they've done some amazing albums. But this album, I feel like, was not just a return to form after Eat the Heat, but it's got like little bits of like all their classic sound, from the early, Breaker and Rust and Wild up through, Metal Heart. And yeah, I just feel like it did not, at the time, I think it made kind of an impression because, it was like this reunion, but it was like, 93 and like heavy metal. And this is very unapologetically heavy metal album. Like it's not trying to cater to the grunge movement. It's not trying to be a groove metal album, in the wake of Pantera. It's not trying to be alternative in any way. It's just a return to the classic sound. So I kind of understand why it maybe didn't do as well commercially, but I'm just surprised more fans aren't, don't talk about this album. And they do play a couple of the songs, I think, once in a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know I've seen them do, I think Objection Overruled, I think they've done. But I forget because, Udo's band has also done some stuff, and I forget who's done what. But So just talking about some of the songs on here. So it starts off with Objection Overruled, and that's kind of got like the very kind of upbeat, kind of almost rock and roll sort of vibe to it. That's like, kind of a throwback to like Burning and stuff from Breaker.
Right.
But still very metal. And then it goes from that straight into I Don't Want to Be Like You, which is just a totally, balls to the wall sort of heavy riff. Just classic Accept. Same with Slaves to Metal, which, and this is kind of the first song where I start to think like, the lyrics on this album are not maybe the best. And it's funny because the album is credited to, words and music by Accept and Duffy, which is, Gabby Hoffman.
Okay.
And that's the same, credits pretty much for all of the classic albums after, from Balls to the Wall on. So I don't really understand if Gabby actually wrote all the lyrics on here or just some of them, because some of them definitely have that classic, more well thought out and touch on some kind of social topics and stuff. Like Protectors of Terror is a really good indictment of, organized religion and stuff like that.
Right.
But then there's a couple songs on here like Slaves to Metal and what's the other one? Donation. That's just kind of a little cringy, the very last song, which is a great song. This One's For You, again, just has some, I don't know, just not the greatest lyrics. So I never quite understood that. But musically, this, and to me, yeah, as I've said before, musically, that's the main thing I look for in an album.
Yeah, for sure.
This just has all the great elements that I love from Accept. It's got, it's very diverse. It's got Amamos La Vida, which is this kind of ballady, kind of a power ballad thing. That's just really well done. It's got, the song Donation is actually a pretty cool kind of AC/DC sort of song, which is another one of those early influences on the band that kind of got lost over time.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to remember that actually was a pretty prominent influence for them, at least sound-wise.
Right, yeah. And then you have All or Nothing, which is just kind of pompous, big kind of epic sing-along sort of thing. But all in all, it's a pretty heavy album. I think it's actually, and with the solid, it's got really good solid production.
It does.
It's at the time, I think it might be their heaviest album up to that point, at least production wise.
It's interesting. Who did the production on this album?
I'm pretty sure it was the band, and they recorded it in Dieter Dirk's studio.
Oh, that would make sense. Yeah.
Produced, recorded, and mixed by Accept at Dirk's studio.
Nice.
Because I remember them complaining about. I think every band complained about working with Dieter Dirks eventually because he was so particular. He would just make them do things over and over and over and over and over.
Not like the Germans to be really.
Well, no, that's a good point.
We'll do it right, and then we will stop. Yes.
But it does sound really good. I think it holds up really well too, production wise, and it's a good transition from their 80s sound to the modern Mark Tornillo albums. I feel you can kind of hear elements of what they were going to be doing later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about the artwork a little bit. It's very minimal, but I thought it was pretty effective. Yeah. And it's actually a photo that, because Wolf Hoffman after they broke up initially, he started doing photography for a
Yeah.
living and got really good at it. And yeah, it's just, a photo that he took that they decided to use for the cover. The band photos in the back are pretty great too, actually.
Yeah, I guess he actually had quite a lot of success as being a photographer. I know he did some like coffee table books where he was like the main photographer and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I remember being sad at the time that it was because Accept had broken up that he was able to do that stuff. But I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, get back to doing the music, which obviously has happened now. So, and I was also, I mean, I remember this album in particular, obviously because hey, Udo's back in the band. Thank
Yeah.
God.
That was a big deal.
God, I love that guy's voice. It's funny. I don't. It probably really is an excellent example of a hidden gem for me because I don't really think of it that often when I think of Accept. For me, I'm sure you'll be radically surprised to hear Restless and Wild always comes to my brain when I think of Accept. And they have so many albums. They have such a huge back catalog that it's really easy to forget. There's these spots in there that are unique and are really interesting in and of themselves that
Right.
aren't necessarily maybe the things that you the points that you would pick out to listen to as often.
Yeah, I mean, Restless and Wild was the first album I heard by them and was blown away by.
Yeah.
So that's always one of the ones that comes to mind for me too.
Yeah, that album is like seared into my brain. I remember just being floored when I heard it and just like obsessing about it for months and months and months.
But yeah, at the time I remember, then I went back and bought Breaker and I was like, oh, this is really good too. And then I remember, I think you or Ted bought the first 2 albums and I heard those, on tapes or whatever. And they were clearly not as good, but I still listen to them quite a bit, like over time. And once in a while, I'll just pull one out and put it on. It's like, it's totally, well, not totally different, but it's very different. It's more hard rock. It's more 70s sounding, but there's some cool stuff on there. And
there is.
And again, like, the later albums, I mean, even Russian Roulette, which was, right before they lost Udo, has some great stuff on it. Like they're one of those bands that over time has, go ahead.
Sorry. They're a super talented band. The musicianship, whatever style they choose to play, they're really good at it. And Wolf Hoffman's guitar playing is actually, I think, super underrated. The guy is a really good guitar player. He plays, there's just some beautiful melodies in his solos and really crisp and sharp riffing. So I think that whole progression of the musical styles, they're good at each step along the way. They were good at it.
Yeah, that's a good point. He is definitely one of the people I think of whenever I hear the term underrated guitarist.
Yeah.
Like Matthias Jabs is up there. And
yes.
Some other people, but yeah, Wolf Hoffman's definitely one of the
all German guitar players. Yes.
I
read something about saying it was a super easy album for them to record. They just kind of went in and they knew what they were doing and everybody showed up to work and they got it done. And it kind of has that kind of not difficult feel to it, like it all flows.
Yeah. It seems like everybody that I've seen talk about it within the band has good memories of it. Like it was a good time because they were getting back together and the tour went well, I guess, when they went on tour and stuff.
Do you know who they toured with or what? I can't think of what other stuff. It's hard for me to put it in context now.
Yeah, I can't remember. And I don't remember if they did a North American tour because I did not see them until much later. I never saw them with Udo, unfortunately. Because they did, I think a lot of touring at that time. And then they did that one-off reunion in 2005 with Udo and did like a big world tour. But I think it was mostly Europe, and probably Japan. Right. But I don't remember if they toured the States or not, or who they toured with.
I remember seeing them on the Balls to the Wall tour, I believe. Yeah.
Where was that?
It was at the Salem Armory, I think.
Okay.
And I think Saxon was the headliner or something like that, if I remember correctly. And Heavy Pettin was the opening act or something weird like that. Some weird bill.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that, but I didn't go. It was like,
Yeah, Ted and I went to that, I think.
yeah.
But yeah, man, incredible live band. And Udo, man, I don't know, there's something about that guy. It's just like he's this contained ball of energy. You can hear it in his voice and it's in his presence and everything.
Um, and yeah, this album also, looking it up on Metal Archives, the highest rated Accept album.
Oh, have you tried other albums to see if it's just always the album you're looking at?
It's so funny.
That's pretty interesting.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had to say about this. Did you have any other insights into this album?
No, I don't think so. I think just because their catalog is so huge, I feel like every time I look back at one of their albums, I feel like, oh, I need to listen to that more. I just don't listen to that, whatever. I can almost pick out any one except for Restless and Wild and go, yeah, even Restless and Wild. It's like, I should listen to this more. This is really good. I remember back in the day when, maybe you bought an album every month or so, or maybe less. And it's like, man, you had the catalog of stuff you could actually listen to was relatively small, even if you had a lot of records compared to what it is today. It's like, my goodness, you could listen to stuff all day long and never hear the same thing twice.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like there's a lot of albums, like more modern albums, that I probably would, have a lot deeper appreciation for if I had the time to sit down and listen to them over and over the way I did.
Yeah.
Wild and those other classic albums.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think about that for this album for sure. But albums like, Highway to Hell or Heaven and Hell or High and Dry, I listen to those things constantly, and I would listen to them multiple times sometimes. It's like the amount of familiarity you could have with the music in that context was kind of amazing compared to today. Like you said, there's plenty of albums that I get and I think, oh, that's a really good album. And maybe it goes into the mix and I don't hear it again for a long time because I got 3 other albums that day, and I can go up to some streaming service and just listen to all kinds of new music, which is great. I mean, it's fantastic, but I think it does, unless you're listening to music all day long, you're not going to get that intimate familiarity with tracks and songs that we used to get.
Yeah, and the appreciation for like some of the more like subtleties of each song too. Like sometimes you listen to a song for the 20th time and you notice some like you just have like some revelation about the way the arrangement works or the way that the guitar solo comes out and goes into the next part. It's like, wow, that's a really cool thing they did. And it's like, you never noticed it before. And you probably wouldn't have ever noticed it if you hadn't listened to it that many times.
Right. I also think, back in the day, even when I had records, I would listen to stuff off cassette that I, dubbed onto cassette. It's kind of a pain to skip a song. So you'd end up listening to not just your favorite songs in an album, but you'd listen to each song in context too, right?
Right.
Something that has somewhat gone away, that the idea that an album is actually a cohesive group of songs, not just individual songs that happen to be put on there. But yeah, stuff grows on you. You notice more things about songs after you've listened to them a few times. It's definitely a different experience in that way. Yeah,
the set list, the track listing is so important, I think, and that, like you said, is something that's kind of gotten lost. So I think back to like Restless and Wild, and it's like, wow, if that album had started with like Get Ready instead of Fast as a Shark, I think it would have had a completely different impact on people.
Yes. Yeah, that was just like, I mean, it seems borderline cliche now, but that was just brilliant. The way that they started that song and had that be the first song on the album, that's just amazing. Really worked.
So I think time to wrap this one up. thanks everyone for watching. And if you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. And yeah, if you have any thoughts about any of these albums, please leave some comments. If you have any other albums that you think are hidden gems that you'd like us to talk about in the future, mention that as well.
Yeah, definitely throw out things that are things that you feel are overlooked, and we'd love to either discover them for the first time ourselves, or go, yeah, that's one of mine too, and throw it in here.
Yeah, because we've got, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure Nels, you also have like a list of like things that you want to talk about. It's like I keep thinking of new ones, like, oh yeah, that's another one that's a good hidden gem.
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy to come up with them.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, that is all for now. We will hopefully have another one of these again next month. And until then, stay metal.
Yeah.